Hey guys, Paul here. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about Yu-Gi-Oh card design as it relates to staples, or more specifically, how it relates to counterplay cards. So the reason I'm talking about this is because the Yu-Gi-Oh North America World Championship qualifier was this past weekend, and Dimension Shifter in particular made a really huge impact at the event. It was used mostly by Kashtira players. It's something that they can easily main deck, and it's a very powerful sort of card for just countering a lot of other decks. When you activate Dimension Shifter, every card that would get into the graveyard becomes banished until the end of the next turn. So not only can your opponent not really comfortably play on that turn, but even on the next turn, things that get like destroyed or sent also still get banished. And so Kashtira was using this in one of the feature matches I watched. They basically shut down a Dragon Link player, and I want to was top 8 maybe, top 16, top 8. And yeah, it happened like 2 games in a row, and so it seems very polarizing and like kind of like he robbed the game from the other guy. And I totally understand it. I know Dimension Shifter is an especially annoying card. I've used it in a few different decks in the past myself. Gren Maju, Fluanderies, those sorts of decks can make great use of it. And it just so happens that Kashtira, which is already kind of seen as the best deck in the format, can also use it. So yeah, surprise, surprise, that really can suck. But the reason I wanted to talk about it is actually because I think that Yu-Gi-Oh card design is kind of at a point where there's not really a way to win when you're designing cards like this. Specifically, I'm going to talk about Dimension Shifter and Nibiru and Dark Ruler No More in this video because all three of them came out in the same product, which is the 2019 Gold Sarcophagus Tins. So here's a little bit of a story that not many people know. I was actually one of the Yu-Gi-Tubers who got to go to that event. It was World 2019 and actually reveal these cards for the first time. You can find the videos somewhere on my channel from like years ago. But yeah, we got to reveal these cards and I actually got to speak with some of the Konami employees who played a really big part in designing these cards. And so I sort of got to ask questions and hear their thoughts on it. Not all of it's in the video, but some of it might be, I don't remember. Either way, though, some of the things that I remember hearing from them was that they knew that these would be really powerful and probably controversial cards, but they also knew that their goal was for them to affect the metagame and for these to be influential cards. And so they're sort of designed with that in mind. It's funny, though, because Nibiru, Dark Ruler No More, and now D-Shifter are all seeing perhaps exactly the effect that they wanted, which is they are making huge impacts in the game and players have a lot of strong thoughts on them. And when I read these cards, I'm kind of reminded that I think that designing cards for Yu-Gi-Oh nowadays just seems hard. Like it seems like it's tough because you've got sort of two contingents of people. You've got the people who are, they're sort of sick of the metagame, and like they're sick of just the way that Yu-Gi-Oh is so fast, and it sets up these boards and these negates, and just the arguments you've heard a billion times, right? Modern Yu-Gi-Oh is just too crazy. Everybody just like shits out monsters on the field. It's too much, and we need a way to just slow this game down. And so these people do want something to kind of check that, but also when you create these cards, you kind of find that there is a counterculture of people who hate how uninteractive these cards can oftentimes be, right? Like Dark Ruler No More, your opponent can't really respond. I remember a period of time where people wanted Dark Ruler No More to be limited or even banned because your opponent can't use monster effects in response. Now there are some counterplays to Dark Ruler No More, right? Like you can chain a spell or a trap card or something to it, and then maybe chain one of your monster's effects, and that can still stop Dark Ruler No More. So there's like a little bit of nuance there, but generally speaking, it can just turn off a field. Trust me, I know I use it a lot in Master Duel because God, it's crazy. And same with Dimension Shifter. It's got a set of weaknesses. It's a high-level monster. You can usually only use it once. Not every deck can comfortably run Dimension Shifter, but still, when it hits, it can feel like it's hard to play against because your opponent either needs to have like the one copy of Call by the Grave they get in the TCG, or that's kind of it. I mean, there aren't a lot of other options. Maybe Cyframe Gamma is a thing. But most decks, can't really interact with it, and then like everything is getting banished, and so it doesn't really feel comfortable to play against. And of course, we all know Nibiru is kind of like their attempt at a nerfed Max C, but still, it can just scoop up the entire board and then like just drop this token, and it can be kind of hard to interact with because you can't even use Call by the Grave against it, and oftentimes when it's happening, I guess you wouldn't really be able to use Cyframe Gamma either. So yeah, all three of these cards have to be kind of purposefully extremely strong and purposefully remove a certain amount of like agency and interactivity from the opponent in order to be effective. Because the alternative, unfortunately, is these cards like Raigeki, Lightning Storm, those sorts of things are also legal, and those could be effective board breakers. But the problem is, those are going to get negated. So if you think about how your modern end board might look today, you're definitely going to have at least one just sort of omni negate on almost any given board. And in many cases, it might be like 2 or 3. And most omni negates are specifically there to stop your opponent from using that Lightning Storm, stop them from using that Raigeki, or whatever card would immediately just fold their field. So you, I think, as a Yu-Gi-Oh card designer, find yourself in a weird spot, right? Just typical board breaking cards usually aren't enough. They're going to get negated. So you have to kind of make a way for them to not just get instantly negated. And that's how you land on Dark Ruler No More. It negates all your opponent's effects, all the monster's effects, and they can't chain monster effects to it. So you have to program in this bit of polarization where it's a little unfair, because what your opponent was doing to you was probably a little unfair. They were going to negate your attempts to play or attempts to clear their board. And so I can see why it can just piss both sides off a little bit. Someone feels like a combo player feels like they spent all this time, learning this combo, going through it, making this board, and their reward for it is that they just lose everything in a nearly uninteractive card. But then meanwhile, if you're the person on the receiving end, then you have to deal with several negates and disruptions and maybe even like a monster with a floodgate effect or something like a Rise Heart, I don't know. Then there's not really much you can do there. So one way or another, this card's going to have to be a little bit unfair for just both parties in some way. But it's got to exist that way because Raigeki wasn't probably doing the job. And it's a shame because Raigeki, it's Raigeki, but it doesn't work. So with Dimension Shifter, I think it's kind of the same way, where it just had to be, I think, it had to land where it landed, because the question that I guess I find myself asking is when people complain about Dimension Shifter, they complain about Dark Ruler No More, they complain about Nibiru. And I know they're 3 separate cards with 3 separate things to dislike about them. But when you complain about almost any given Yu-Gi-Oh card, I always sort of ask people, okay, well, how would you balance it? What would be the alternative? Because oftentimes when asked to create a way to make a balanced Dimension Shifter, what would you change about it? Because if you change almost anything about how most of these cards work, then they just end up being useless, right? Like, we read so many new Yu-Gi-Oh staples in every new set, and they just don't catch on oftentimes because either it's like a trap, so it's too slow, or it's a spell that maybe gets rid of things, but it would just get negated anyway because it doesn't have sort of the Dark Ruler No More, or maybe Ultimate Slayer type of effect, or Forbidden Droplets type of effect where it can't be interacted with. So it just kind of gets swept to the wayside. It's like, in order for staples and kind of counterplay staple type of cards to make any impact and really do anything, they have to be unfair. And it really sucks. I made a video about this not that long ago about how Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of this inherently unfair game. You're going to try to sort of wash your opponent, blow them out, and they're trying to do the same thing to you. So it feels like this is where we are. Does anybody have any suggestions on fixing this? And I mean, realistically, right? What is a realistic fix for cards like this? If you hate Dimension Shifter, what do you think is kind of a way that could be balanced that would still make it usable, but maybe not broken or so polarizing? And if it had that change, would people actually still use it? Same goes for Dark Ruler No More. Same goes for Nibiru. I mean, even Nibiru right now has seen a big fall off because a lot of decks can set up that interruption by their 5th summon, and if they can make whether it's Apollosa or any number of other negation monsters, if it can set that up, then even Nibiru becomes pretty useless, as strong as it can otherwise be. There are even decks that can play through Nibiru. So I guess it's just that kind of arms race between the driver's seat, or the unstoppable force and the immovable object, right? Who deserves to get their way in Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess, is the real question I'm asking for you guys. And where do you land on it? Do you think that these cards are good? Are they necessary evils? Do you think that there's enough weaknesses programmed into these cards? Because all 3 of them have weaknesses. Or do you think it's just still BS, I don't like them, they need to all be banned? And if they were all banned, would Yu-Gi-Oh be actually better off for it? I'm not so sure. I find myself, I don't like a well-placed Nibiru any more than anybody else does. I don't really like Dark Ruler No More against my established board, and I certainly hate Dimension Shifter when I'm playing anything that has anything to do with the graveyard. But, I also think that if those cards weren't there, and would we just be back to complaining about how, man, combo decks are just so degenerate and wild, what are we going to do? I don't know. Leave your suggestions in the comments, and we can surmise perhaps a way to balance this wildly unbalanced game. Anyways, that's going to be it. I want to know what you guys think, so let me know down in the comments, or come hang out with me over on Twitter and we can chat about it there. That's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Fast turn.